of India's commitment to decarbonisation and the key levers that the Indian government is trying to pull to accelerate that journey?
So, India is not responsible for the carbonization in the world. India's per capita consumption has been extremely low. But India will have to be the only country in the world, and probably the first country in the world, to industrialize without carbonization. Our perspective is that this is not a challenge, this is a massive opportunity. And the challenge is that India is producing renewables at about 2.7 cents per kilowatt hour. That is about roughly 1 rupee 99 paisa per kilowatt hour. It is the only country in the world which has met its NDC targets, which were committed at COP21. None of the G20 countries achieved it other than India. The challenge is that India must bring down the cost of renewable from 2.7 cents per kilowatt hour to almost its half, that is 1.35 cents per kilowatt hour. Then crack water, produce green hydrogen, and become the center of the world for green hydrogen. The cost of green hydrogen is roughly around $4 to $4.25 per kilogram. Our challenge is to bring it down to about roughly $2.25 to $2.5 per kilogram by 2025 and bring it down to $1 per kilogram by 2030. This would mean that you keep enhancing your renewables to massive scales at lower prices, because in the cost of green hydrogen, 70% is renewable, 10% is the cost of electrolyzer, 20% is the balance of plant. Therefore, if you keep doing renewables, you will end up with the duck curve, which is what California faced. Its power grid could not manage so much of renewables. So you have to do 24/7 green power. And the best methodology for that is that what the Honorable Chief Minister in his very dynamic fashion said, that you have wind, you have solar, you have pump storage, and then use that to crack and produce green hydrogen, which will be the cheapest form of green hydrogen. Now what Andhra has done, 1650 megawatt of pump storage with solar and wind, is the biggest of its kind in the world. And if Andhra is able to do this to 23,000 megawatt, that means that India will become the center of decarbonization in the world. And that is what Andhra holds a model for the rest of the world in terms of decarbonizing your economy. Decarbonization cannot happen with just electric mobility. It cannot happen unless and until we understand that electricity is just 18% of energy. 82% of energy is hard to abate sectors. It's refinery, it's steel plants, it's fertilizer, it's long distance transport. They cannot run on electricity. If it's renewable energy, they can't run on electricity. They run on, grey hydrogen, or they run on fossil fuels, or they run on coal. So you have to make 82% of your energy, which is hard to abate sector, green. And the hard to abate sector can only be made green with green hydrogen. And that is the challenge before the world. What has the International Shipping Organization said? 50% of shipping must go green. What has Japan said? I'm going to be the biggest importer of ammonia. What has Europe said? That we'll put border taxes by 2026. So whether we like it or not, fertilizer will have to go the ammonia route. Steel will have to go the green route. Shipping will have to go the green route. What is the answer to that in the world? That's green hydrogen. And that is where Andhra has taken the leadership under the leadership of the Honorable Chief Minister. And that is what a lesson for the rest of the Indian states and for the rest of the world. And that is how you decarbonize your economy and decarbonize the world.
Amitabh, well said, very powerfully said, and I completely agree. This is on behalf not just of the state and India, but for the world, because that green hydrogen economy is a critical part of it, and we'll circle back to that. But you just described steel as one of the hard-to-abate sectors, so it's rather fortunate that we have a spokesperson for the world's most successful steel as well as mining industry. Aditya, can I understand, first of all, do you want to just give us what's the pathway that specifically ArcelorMittal is taking in terms of decarbonisation? And you must be running lots and lots of different initiatives. Maybe you can tease out the one or two that you think are the most promising in terms of driving that transition.
Sure, thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you to the Honourable Chief Minister here for having us. Thank you, Amitabh, for all your comments and your passion. It's clearly infectious. So maybe I'll start with the bad news. Amitabh alluded to it, but steel is responsible for 8% of global CO2 emissions. So it's massive. I mean, 8% is huge, right? We're not talking about 1 or 2, but 8% of global emissions. The not so bad news, and I'm not at all biased, steel is still a wonderful material because it is infinitely recyclable. There is no other material that can be recycled into perpetuity. You will never find steel in the oceans. And steel, in spite of being responsible for 8% of global emissions, has on a per-ton basis the lowest carbon footprint, because it requires actually, relative to aluminium or carbon fiber or anything you come up with, much lower energy to make steel. And so that's why I said it's a wonderful material. And so 8% why, if it's low carbon, is just because so much of steel is used. So much of steel is used in anything you see, whether it's your car or this building or your washing machine or even your champagne bottle, the cork is made from wire of steel. The good news is that steel has a way to decarbonize, and we can make green steel. And at ArcelorMittal, we're selling green steel as of today. We're selling about 60,000 tons of green steel in Europe. In the next 2 years, we'll hit 600,000 tons of green steel. And how do we do it? Well, fundamentally, you change your coal-based process, because steel originally was made from coal. And as we have heard today, you substitute gas. So you can start with natural gas, which dramatically reduces your carbon emissions. And when hydrogen is affordable and available, you bring in hydrogen. So that's fundamentally how the process will evolve. So the good news is that we can actually still make the same quality of steel, maybe depending on if we get hydrogen at $1.50 at the same cost, green steel using hydrogen instead of coal. So it's a huge opportunity, right? It's a huge opportunity for providers of renewable power to make the hydrogen electrolyzers, a huge opportunity for the global steel industry to actually decarbonize. At ArcelorMittal, we plan to lead the way, primarily because we have a global footprint. We are very keen on R&D. We spend about $300 million a year on R&D. So we have $3 billion of IP in the last 10 years sitting in our business, which we can deploy to improve process and product. Over the next 10 years, we plan to reduce our global carbon emissions by 25%. Through an investment of $10 billion. And primarily it's utilizing all of these things that we have spoken about, i.e. renewable power, funding electric furnaces, setting up DRI facilities, which first use natural gas and then hydrogen. So we have plans in different parts of the world to achieve this. Coming to Andhra. So we have made a significant investment in Andhra Pradesh. We have partnered with Anil at Greenco to invest in our first global renewable project. And I think that is the key message. ArcelorMittal operates in 27 countries, and we have chosen the state of Andhra Pradesh for our first renewable project. For many reasons, I think you've heard a lot today. It's really a force in creating a friendly business environment. But I think also the vision of having direct pumped hydro storage. I had a chance to visit Kurnool, and it's very impressive what is happening down there. I think I urge all of you to visit and see really what is happening on the ground in Andhra Pradesh. And just going there, you feel the energy, the dynamism. And so our first renewable project, it's a 4,500 crore investment, $650 million, 250 megawatts of 24-hour round-the-clock power. Why is that interesting? It reduces carbon emissions in our facility in India by 1.5 million tons. What is 1.5 million tons? It's 350,000 cars off the road. Okay? So it's real direct, it's immediate impact, it's interesting for the business to do. We plan to double it. I'm very excited by my meeting this afternoon and on just seeing the progress that we have made. We plan to double that investment. We'll probably finalize that decision in the next few months. And as we get more and more renewable power, 33,000 megawatts, we can move into hydrogen. Because if the power is low cost, the hydrogen becomes low cost, it's cost effective for the steel industry to utilize. And the demand is significant. So I think we're all off to a good start. I think there are tremendous ingredients available in Andhra, the whole ecosystem in India, and we can really lead the way in terms of decarbonizing not only the Indian steel business, but also use some of that knowledge, maybe export some of the hydrogen to other parts of the world.
Aditya, thank you very, very much indeed. This takes us logically to you, because the story we've just heard is that renewable energy is the underpinning of so much else. We need renewable energy for the direct drawing of electricity in order to be able to transition away from coal and gas power stations, but we also need it to be able to convert to hydrogen, which then becomes a storage mechanism, which is critically important to be able to overcome intermittency in renewable assets. And then we need it, for example, to create ammonia, which then drives the fertilizer industry, which goes into agriculture and shipping and so on. So it's all underpinned by the very thing that Greenco is investing in. So tell us what you are going to do to help save the world.
Hi. Thanks, Richard, and good afternoon, everyone, ladies and gentlemen. I would say we are a little over a decade-old company as a Greenco. We had a very modest start. From the day one onwards, we have always been trying to develop renewables with the grid parity. And we always came up with some innovative thought process. How do we make the energy available at the right pricing, right location, and how do we move this green electron? To start with, initially says we had a small hydros which we built in a cascading manner, which made the whole hydro energy available much cheaper at the time competing with the thermals. And later we developed a large-scale wind farms and brought down the actually in GEs and Gameshas to do them the localization, and created in long-distance transmission lines to unlock the medium wind speed sites, and made sure that we gave a long-term agreements to the GEs and Gameshas and made them to manufacture in India and bring in the lower costs. Later stage, we developed a hybrid wind and solar sites to unlock the better value creation and brought down the price of the hybrid renewables sub 4 rupee levels and 3 rupee levels down the line. Understanding the whole energy available at such a low cost, how do we make them available round the clock and make them to be in journeying towards peak hour management? That's when we were able to unlock this hydro pump storages. And thanks to the Government of India and Government of Andhra Pradesh under the leadership of Honorable Chief Minister, we were able to successfully unlock the whole challenges we had to start developing the whole project. So that's it. Thanks a lot.
Anil, thank you very much indeed. So Florence, Dassault Systems is a leading software business, and a huge amount of your design and manufacturing software goes into the sorts of industries that we're talking about here. How do you see this from your perspective? I also know you're very active in the States.
Definitely, and thank you very much, Mr. Chief Minister, for inviting me to this panel. What do we do at Dassault Systèmes? We are basically a software company that is doing virtual twin. And why are virtual twin interesting for sustainability? Because if you have the virtual twin of a product, be it a car, be it a plane, be it a bridge, then you can design everything for sustainability. You can test in the virtual world different materials, different processes, and you can choose the most sustainable to implement the most sustainable option. In the beginning of last year, we released a study with Accenture that shows that if we apply virtual twin to 5 use cases in car, high tech, pharmaceutical industry, consumer good, and transportation, then we could save 7.5 gigaton of CO2 by 2030, which is the equivalent of 1 year of emission of the transportation industry. So it's big. And why is it big? Because basically 80% of the impact of a product is decided at the design phase. So if you optimize at the design phase for sustainability, you can totally change the game. So that's what we are doing with our Indian partners in India, and we are very lucky to be working in Andhra Pradesh, and it's very efficient. We've seen amazing projects here on electric vehicles, two wheels or four wheels electric vehicle, but also example in consumer good, in packaging companies, and we think it's a massive disruption when it comes to make the world and the industry more sustainable.
Thank you very much, Florence. So we actually have plenty of time. So I'd like to cycle back and come back to a few of the points that have been made in the opening comments, and we may well have some time for some questions. So if you have a burning question and you want to in a few minutes wave very, very clearly at me, we will try and bring you in. Aditya, I want to come back to something that you referenced to the fact that obviously ArcelorMittal is operating across a number of different jurisdictions, and then you referenced specifically why the attractions of investing in the state of Andhra Pradesh. Just from your experience across different jurisdictions, what are the things that you're looking for in terms of policy support that makes the difference between somewhere being really attractive to invest in versus somewhere else that you might not prioritise in the same way?
Sure. Richard, let me talk about the steel business, because the renewable business has different policy imperatives, right? For renewable, first of all, you need ease of business, you need land acquisition, and the most important is obviously good wind and good sun, right? Which Andhra has, all of those, ease of doing business, land availability, pump storage. For steel, it's a different it's different dynamics. For the steel industry, I think the most important is to have a level playing field. Okay, so we want to compete with other steel companies which have the same imperative to decarbonize, because fundamentally, as you decarbonize, your cost is going to rise. And how are we going to be successful in places like Europe, where they keep on adding carbon taxes if there's no carbon border adjustment? Because then what is going to happen is steel companies will not decarbonize and export their steel into Europe, and we will not be helping the environment because steel companies in Europe will shut down. So I think that's the first thing. So if India decides to put a carbon tax or create certain incentives to decarbonize, it should be done in a way that is level for all competition. The other option, if you don't create a level playing field, is to stimulate green demand, green steel demand, right? And there are many ways of doing that, through regulatory support. So does automotive need 25% of all their steel? Should it be green? When governments put out bids for infrastructure, is there a mandate that it needs to be made through green steel? So you need market forces to create the demand, because as you heard from me, we have to spend $10 billion. And steel is capital intensive, steel is highly cyclical, steel is not the most profitable business in the world. Without a level playing field, without creating either regulatory support or market forces for demand, it is not obvious for the steel industry to decarbonize. I mean, these technologies are there, but it's not like these technologies were invested last year. They were there 10 years ago, 20 years ago. But fundamentally, moving away from coal to gas or to hydrogen is more expensive. And so what are the incentives or the policy framework to make that feasible? We believe that governments are acting in that direction. So we see strong policy support. And so if you look at our $10 billion investment, we have already announced $6.5 billion, excluding the renewable in Andhra. And that's really in Spain, in France, in Belgium, in Germany as well, and in Canada. We are very impressed with what the Canadian government is doing. And so those are the first 4 jurisdictions in which we have started our decarbonizing journey.
That's super. Thank you very much. And I spend a huge amount of my time in the company of infrastructure investors, and indeed in a conversation only last week, which was specifically around the hydrogen economy. The infrastructure investors were saying the challenges here are we don't have a whole market for it yet. So it's isolated investments in different companies and countries, and they're worried about the technology risk still. So the sorts of underpinnings that you're talking about, I think, are really critical. Amitabh, if I can come back to you, I mean, you've had a distinguished career in the Indian civil service. You probably know better than almost anybody how to incentivise things in an economy. What's your reflection on what are those real levers that are going to accelerate and support the sorts of investments that Aditya is talking about?
So my belief is that companies which do not go digital, which do not go green, will find it very difficult to survive beyond 2026. And actually, if you look at the trend in the last 2-3 years, only companies which have gone digital and gone green, they have attracted valuation, they have attracted investments. So if you don't want to go bust, then the only way is to go green and go digital. And actually, it's remarkable. I mean, I have known ArcelorMittal. I know Aditya's dad, who's one of the most dynamic entrepreneurs in the world. And his son is equally, he's even more progressive to think about green growth. And he laid out his vision for this. And I've known Anil for some time recently. He's like a cowboy in the world of energy. He's a disruptor. He's a disruptor, and he's actually, he's the kind of disruption he's bringing in and the kind of size and scale he's bringing in is unparalleled. And it's all being done under a very dynamic chief minister. And the chief minister is providing that vision of doing this, of solar, wind, pump storage, all in the state of Andhra Pradesh. Because Andhra is one state which has the ability to do renewables, it has the ability to do wind, it has the ability to do pump storage, which no other state has. So you can be the center of the world today. And what the government of India is doing is to create the right policy framework. It's come out with a policy framework where it's laid down the same policy incentives for green hydrogen as it has for renewable, that when you transmit power, there'll be no wheeling charges, etc. A whole range of policy measures have been announced. The hydrogen mission is being announced, and we are very clear that by bringing in size and scale, we'll bring down the cost of green hydrogen. This is an opportunity not merely for Andhra, it's an opportunity for India. Quite often, we do small things and we don't do, the transition phase is very time-taking. And therefore, we lose this opportunity to be a global champion. It's important to understand that India is climatically blessed and Andhra is climatically blessed. And because it is blessed, the competition for that, there's no competition even from China as climatic conditions are concerned. China is not your competitor. The size and scale is only India. The only other competition in climatic condition comes from Middle East. Now, Middle East is already flushed with oil and gas, and therefore India has the climatic condition. It is blessed. It has the wind power. It has the renewable power. It is possible for it to make itself the least cost producer by doing size and scale. That is important. Bring in size and scale. Once you've done that, and that is what this partnership is all about. To do 1650 megawatt of pump storage is actually a lesson for everybody else at Davos. What you're talking about here is a lesson for everybody else at the Congress Center. That this is about a new world of tomorrow. This is about new technology of tomorrow. This is about transforming the world of tomorrow.
Here, it's not we don't have time for incremental. This has to be completely transformational change. And the handshake that you've described between companies that have the innovation and the drive, but backed up by the support of public policies, I think is hugely powerful. And I'm going to hand it back to you. You've been talking about green molecules. And I'm just, you might want to just tease that out for the audience, but also I know that you're investing in the largest possible collection of solar and wind and pump storage, and it will be backed up by. Just talk to us about that particular reason to again invest in the state of Andhra Pradesh. But what's the green molecule piece?
Just to start with. Even backdrop, sir, while whole India is well blessed with the climatic conditions for renewables, Andhra is especially blessed with an plateau terrain hilltops within Eastern Ghats and having combination of two river basins, Krishna and Godavari river basin, and having well integrated well irrigation systems that enables towards developing such a large scale pump storage systems around in Andhra. And integrating these, I keep saying that at Greenco, our focus is how do you want to treat your green electron, and how low cost and how do you make it more effective to making it moving from right from into the bulbs, into the wheels, into the chemicals. How do we make this green electron to move its journey is what we are trying to specialize ourselves and put our innovations in and around storage technologies, digitization, and bring AI towards and forecasting towards the right energy availabilities and matching with the grid demand systems. That was actually triggered us towards creating this hydrogen, green hydrogen through electrolyzer process. We partnered with one of the Belgium's a company called John Crocker to develop an 2 gigawatt scale of an electrolyzer manufacturing to enable towards an large scale green transition. Yet our first project is going to be in million tons of ammonia production per annum, which we're hoping that by 2025 we're able to bring that industrial scale of ammonia production levels along with supporting various other industries to make them green, but trying to bring in multi-million tons of ammonia per annum capacities to export to the world. That's what
Thank you. Florence, back to you finally before I open it up for any questions from the audience. I hope we'll have at least one or two. We can't do this incrementally. We have to do it by system change, which you've spoken about, so we have to do it by giant leaps, if you like. Are there any particular examples that you can see in the world of technology and software which you think really have that power to drive that level of change?
Yes, definitely. And thank you very much for the question. And I agree with you, sir. If you want to go green, you have to go digital. And that's what we are doing at the System. So basically we think, as I said, that virtual twin are a very, very powerful tool in order to make companies and businesses digital. For example, we partnered with a company called Metsaboard. What are they doing, Metsaboard? They are going packaging. And thanks to the virtual twin of their packaging, they were able to become carbon neutral just by optimizing their packaging from the design phase to the sustainable phase to the sustainable supply chain. So that's very powerful. And it's also very powerful in other industry like construction. You perhaps know that construction industry and buildings, they represent 30% of the emission of the electricity. So if you optimize the virtual twin of your building, then you can take giant leaps when it comes to the sustainability of your building, and you can save up to 70% of the energy consumption of the buildings. And this is also something we are doing in partnership with companies like Bouygues Construction, where they basically use virtual twin of the construction, be it a bridge or a building, to optimize everything and also optimize the way they are going to build the infrastructure with a minimum of materials, a minimum of supply chain included, so it's minimum of carbon emission at the same time. And I also think that virtual twin can be super powerful when it comes to include renewable in a territory. Because it's not so easy to include renewable. Of course, you have solar and wind, but you also have renewable, battery stored thanks to that can be done. But you have this system to work all together. And we are doing with some very important energy provider, virtual twin of the system of a territory in order to make sure that with the increase of charging station, with the increase of electricity need in the territory, plus the increase of renewable, you still always have the electricity at the right time for every stakeholders at the territory. And if you do that, at the scale of the virtual twin of your territory, you can run thousands of scenarios to make sure that it's always working. So I think these are giant steps when it comes to optimize everything and making a territory more sustainable.
Florence, thank you very much indeed. We do have time for a question. Has anybody got a burning question they'd like to ask this part? You, sir, right at the back. And if you can keep it really succinct in terms of your question, that would be super helpful.
Thank you very much, Richard. Firstly, may I congratulate GreenCo for an innovative project that you came up with. And thank you, CM, sir, for coming up and encouraging this thing to decarbonize in the state. I'm Aryan Uday, a councillor of Kensington and Chelsea, London. Mr. Mittal, you're one of my constituents. This is more related to me, and I was born in Andhra Pradesh. I just want to really request the government and Amitabh Ji to advise the national government not to put more carbon tax on companies that what Mr. Aditya has just raised, because that put more pressure on the companies in terms of running their finances. I sit on the London ULEZ low carbon emission zone, and we've put more taxes on cars that run on diesel vehicles. Nothing much we have achieved, but rather than giving more incentives to companies that could operate and come up with innovative ideas so that gradually they would transition to a decarbonized economy and help more companies produce decarbonized products. So I would request the Chief Minister of Andhra Pradesh to please consider that, and also Amitabh Ji to advise the Indian government on that. And thank you, Mr. Mittal, for your thing. And GreenCo, Anil sir, thanks for such a great, amazing project. I'm sure this would showcase the entire world to come to Andhra Pradesh. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. And I think there was another hand that went up. Could this gentleman here, please? Thank you.
Hi, this is Chandrasekhar. Just a quick question. It's really appreciable that you guys are doing this. One of the key things, I'm a part of the UK Telangana Chamber of Commerce, and we come across all this continuously. We've been conducting some similar sessions on that, and we've been asked same thing, that there is a bits and bobs everywhere happening in the world regarding the green revolution or carbon footprint, lowering the carbon footprint and everything. But the biggest problem we are seeing, or everybody's concern, is that, for example, they're producing the electricity or they're doing the batteries and everything, but the byproducts which is happening, for example, on the electric vehicles, the battery which is expired after 5-6 years, it is actually neutralizing the carbon footprint which they saved it. So, for example, similar thing with the energy things. Once they produce energy, the downstream, which is the byproducts of the energy supplied to the household or the factories and everything, I think that will, don't you think that will neutralize the carbon footprint which you saved? And what is the sort of, as a national level government or a state level government, Honorable Chief Minister, so do you have any sort of a global policy in your state, or do you have any recommendations throughout India where, as Richard said, that it cannot be done on the bits and balls, it has to be done as something like a COVID, which is a game changer for the whole thing. So is there anything, or anybody from the panel, do you have any suggestions that XYZ need to be done in order to actually make really sense carbon footprint or reducing these things? Anybody that would be really appreciable?
Thank you. Thank you. Whether we can do justice to that in the time available, I'm not entirely sure, though I do think there's something really important about the data that gives the transparency that runs right the way through the supply chain, that allows you to really get underneath the question you've just asked about, you know, whether some of the effects offset to some degree.
But on this particular thing, let me answer. GreenCo, along with the Center of CMET, Government of India and Government of Telangana, we set up a new center for circular economy. We are developing a center where we could able to recycle the batteries and solar panels, and this should have been established in Hyderabad, and this has been well established. We should visit it, and there's a lot of new things which have been getting done there.
And
so what I'm going to say is, this is in delivery, but what happens with other sectors? For example, you're producing electricity, which is an amazing job, but the downstream, don't you think that we have to do it in pretty much the sectors which is consuming your products?
I will explain details.
Very quickly, and then I'd like to bring Amitabh in on the first question.
I wanted to say, as you said, with the data, with the virtual twin of your battery, you can already plan for the circularity of your battery, the second life, the third life, the fourth life. And we're having more and more projects on batteries, just on that, on battery, but also on electric vehicle, where you want to recycle everything and circularize everything.
Thank you. Amitabh, that first question. How much do you see this about change driven by incentives? How much is there going to be nonetheless a need for a regulatory push that might involve, for example, higher carbon taxes? Where do you see that balance?
So first of all, I'm a strong believer that these long-term goals of 2050, etc., are ploys by the Western countries to shift the goalpost on an annual basis. They have never achieved their short-term goals. And, you can look at the history from COP1 to COP27. None of the Western countries have ever achieved their goal which they have committed to. And I can assure you right now that they'll not achieve the goal that they committed for 2050 either. Because achieving that goal really means what the Prime Minister said, changing lifestyles. It's about lifestyle for environment, he calls it, and that is individual behaviors have to change. Individual behavior means that your lifestyle of consumerism has to change. You go to New York, you will find nobody sitting in a building all night, the lights are on. Whole night the lights are on, water taps on. So consumerism, unless you don't change that, climate change will not alter. So every individual has to change his lifestyle. That's number one, to my mind. And secondly, unless we don't build in a very strong circular economy framework, and that would really mean that we don't start mandating, but we start building circular economy from the point of design and R&D. At the point of design, that everything must be an input into some other thing or there has to be an extended producer's responsibility for that circular economy to succeed. Not as a mandate, because then you will tamper with ease of doing business, you will impact businesses. But the businesses themselves, as according to the design framework, and that has to be embedded in the design, has to be built in. And circular economy really is the answer to what he's saying.
Thank you very much. Honourable Chief Minister, if we could come back to you for any closing thoughts before we pass some gifts to our panel members, that would be lovely.
In fact, the very fact that we're having a big debate on this, the very fact that we've taken a few steps to address this issue, understanding and realizing that we need to address this issue and we need to decarbonize it, itself is a huge leap forward. Going forward, what Andhra Pradesh is offering and what Andhra Pradesh is doing is setting the trend. One, it's showcasing a huge 5,350 megawatt integrated solar, wind and pump storage project together in one location. Itself is a huge showcase. And through this, and in this 1650 megawatt of pump storage, just imagine the size of the battery that we're talking about. And a battery without the ill effects of lithium or something else. Just the water to play around with. So this is something that is going to be the future for this entire globe. And Andhra Pradesh is offering a huge opportunity where we're talking about just not 1650 megawatt that is coming up, but a potential for anybody who is interested to come and join the bandwagon. We have a potential of 33,000 megawatt available. So this is the closing remarks that Andhra Pradesh is welcoming you. And anybody who's got certain passion for environment, wanting to think big, Andhra Pradesh is the state. Thank you all.
Thank you, sir. So before you all rush off, the Chief Minister is going to give some thank yous to the panel members, and then if you would just stay seated long enough to allow the panel to escape the room, that would be much appreciated. Thank you. And can I just say on my own behalf a big thank you to each of our panel members as well as to you, sir. Thank you.